Hello there, and welcome to my Blender tutorial where I show you how to create a character from scratch using only Blender. So let's get started. So here's my starting scene. You can see the sphere, which I'm gonna be using to make the body. On the left, I have a ruler, which helps me with the proportions, and the monkey head at the top just allows me to see in which way the character is supposed to be actually facing. And as you can see here, I immediately go into sculpt mode. The symmetry at the top is already enabled, so I just start sculpting using the grab brush, nothing really special. First I'm adjusting the upper and lower torso, upper for the rib cage, lower for the thighs. And yeah, that's pretty much really it when it comes to that original start. Once again, just moving the things using the grab brush. I'm using mouse and keyboard for this, first start because, there's no need to use the pen for this, early stages. Some tips I can give you, shortcuts. G is the default shortcut for the grab brush. I pretty much use it all the time. F to scale the brush up and down. So the size of it, basically, you just press F and then you scale the size, make the size different. And make sure that you save very often. And yeah, as you can see here, this video is pretty long because I'm not speeding anything up. I'm just showing you how to create the character from scratch using just regular speed and post commentary so I can help you out. So here I am remeshing the mesh, which basically allows you to get more denser mesh. And then I'm switching to my tablet to start smoothing things out. So any brush can switch into a smooth brush by pressing and holding shift. So that's what I'm doing. I'm pressing and holding shift and I'm smoothing it over. And the way I remeshed it is I pressed Shift R to choose how much I want to remesh it by. And then I pressed Control R to actually initialize the remesh. So here again, I'm just using the grab brush to move things around, adjusting the back and the front, and getting those details that I want to get there. And whenever you see me moving the brush up and down, it's probably I'm just smoothing it over, I'm pressing and holding shift and just smoothing it over. And I think at this point I started using the pen from my digital tablet to start doing stuff. All right, I think I'm gonna be I'm switching to another brush now. This is the crease brush. The default shortcut is Shift-C, and it basically creases things to add details. So as you can see here, I'm just adding some, a line in the midsection that, that's where the abs are going to be. And here I'm just planning on how it's going to look. Just adding another crease here. And I think this is, the back crease. And I'm going to combine the creases here at the bottom where the crotch is. I'm switching back to the grab tool, once again, press G to switch back, and then, if you want the crease tool, Shift-C. Now you don't need to learn the shortcuts, but they help a lot. So right now I'm just forming the rib cage here. And I think I'm deciding, no, I guess not. This was recorded a while back, so my memory of it is kinda shoddy. But yeah, I'm zooming out to, I guess, check the proportions and everything. And now, okay, yeah, this is the blobber brush right here. So basically what I did is I just used the blob brush on the shoulders to just create this blob, and then I'm using the grab brush to basically pull down the shoulders. Now as you can see here, the shoulders are kind of wonky, but I fixed that later on. Basically what's going to happen later on is I'm going to create a cylinder and make it into an arm, and then slot that cylinder in between the shoulder, basically where the armpit right there is. You'll see it later on. And then another thing you can do, another tip I can give you is pretty much with every brush, you can press and hold Control, and that will invert the brush. So basically, instead of creasing inwards, it will crease outwards. For example, for the crease brush, there's, for example, the inflate brush. Usually it just inflates, but you can press and hold Control, and that will basically deflate. So here I'm just using the crease brush to mark the chest area at the front. Just, to give me an approximation where I, want it to be. Later on I smooth it out and, well, you'll see. Adjusting the neck area a little bit. Moving the ribcage a little bit down. And basically the ribcage is like an egg shape if you look at it from the sides. Or I should say from the front. Here I'm just adding some lines where the butt is going to be. Smoothing out the section between the rib cage and the other part. I don't know. I don't really know I'm not really good with anatomy yet. I'm still learning. Yes, so now I'm just adding some volume here for the back muscles and increasing them to give them a little bit more exaggerated look. And I should probably say that this is going to be, as you saw at the beginning, a very stylistic character. So don't expect super realism and stuff. So it's just, stylistic character that looks fairly decent. Basically, I recorded this whole character creation on my Twitch channel. I basically recorded and streamed it at the same time. So if you, have any additional questions that you might have, just feel free to, hop on to my Twitch channel, while I'm streaming, and feel free to ask. I always try to help people if I know how to. I stream basically characters like this all the time from scratch. So, if you join, and there's a high chance that you'll see me creating a new character from scratch in Blender. You might learn additional things. And if you during the video, if you see me pause, it's probably just me checking the reference, because you always want to use references for characters. So people often ask me, okay, why Blender? Why not other software? Why not ZBrush? Personally, it's just that Blender is free. There's a lot of tutorials on how to use Blender, and that's pretty much it, really. It gets the job done, you know? I like it. There's nothing like it's not perfect, of course, but it gets the job done. And simple as that. So people ask me, what add-ons do I use? Pretty much the only add-ons that I use are, well, there's two main ones. Just Loop Tools, which comes with Blender, and Rigify for rigging. So here I went into edit mode, I enabled proportional editing, which you can press O as for the shortcut, or you can just click at the top. There's a button for it. And then you just use your scroll wheel to adjust the proportional editing size. Proportional editing is basically, let's say that you're moving a vertex or like a face or an edge. Well, proportional editing basically allows it to move other things as well in a certain radius. It's basically like sculpting while in edit mode. I guess it's a oversimplified explanation, but it's kind of like that. So you might notice that, I make these, detailed creases, but then I smooth them out. It's basically, I change my mind. Sometimes, I make some creases and I'm like, that doesn't look good. So then I change it. Or sometimes I want to see how it's going to look, but then I smooth it out. And then, actually, crease it later on. So here, I'm adding another UV sphere. So you press Shift A, and then you go to Mesh, and then you grab a UV sphere. I moved it towards the back for the butt, gave it a mirror modifier, and here I'm just renaming it to keep it organized. So I'm just, resizing it in edit mode, scaling it. You can press S to scale, you can press G to move things around. Basic shortcuts. Here I enable proportional editing again, and I'm using mouse wheel to scroll up. But then I decided, it would be better to just move it a little bit closer, scale a little bit, and now as you can see here, that's how it works. Now when it comes to the butt, I usually just create a sphere, move it kind of in place, and then I just leave it there. I don't really, do much with it immediately. And you will see what I mean by that later on. So right now I'm getting a cylinder. These are going to be the legs. I scale it along the Z axis. Press, S and then Z, and then you just move your mouse to scale it up. I'm adding a couple loop cuts. You can press Ctrl R, and then you can use your mouse wheel to change the amount of loop cuts you want to add. Here I'm pressing E to extrude, and I'm just extruding it, so it kind of gives it this like shape that kind of goes inside the leg. And now I just go into sculpt mode to start sculpting the leg into shape. Now as you can see here, this is a low poly sculpt. You can still sculpt things even though they're low poly. I decided to add a mirror here. So here I'm just counting using the ruler on the left on where the knee is going to be. Usually I have it between 5 and 6 blocks. You can see those blocks in the background, the grid. Well, if you count 5 or 6 from the bottom, that's where the knee usually is for me. Here I decided to just move the leg a little bit forward. Using edit mode to just move things around. And basically, the more you get it into a proper shape when it's low poly, the easier it is going to be later on when it's high poly. Adding more loop cuts, once again by pressing Ctrl R. Using the mouse wheel to select how many loop cuts you want. And once again, I'm using references for the anatomy to kind of gauge where things are going to be. Now here I'm once again remeshing it, so Shift R to choose by how much you want to remesh it. And then you press Ctrl R to actually remesh it. So basically, first you're choosing, the amount, and then you're choosing, to apply that amount. So once again, just using the smooth brush. So any brush can become a smooth brush by pressing holding Shift. So people often ask me, how long have I been using Blender? How long have I been sculpting? And I've been using Blender since 2.8 came out, which was, I think, around in 2016. Back then, I was just doing simple animations from Ducky 3D, nothing complicated. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just following the tutorial, and most of the time I was just oblivious to what I was doing. But as time passed, I learned the basics. I started in 2019, I started making some outfits for game characters. So I would have like a game model already made, and I would just make a character outfit for it. Here I'm just, by the way, scaling this down and moving it around. And then around mid-2020, I decided, you know what, I like making outfits, but I would like to also make characters as well. So I watched some tutorials on YouTube, mostly by Flycat, because he modeled characters back then, especially the elf warrior character that he made, Elf Knight, I think he was. So I basically started, modeling characters from scratch in Blender. Because I didn't have a graphics tablet back then, I would just model it. So here, once again, I'm starting to add a little bit more detail to the legs. I'm using the crease brush. I started at the back, and then I made that line going between the legs, and then coming to the front. As you can see there. Now when you're sculpting, well, it depends on what kind of character you want to make. You don't need to make it super high poly. If you want a stylistic character, not necessary. Now, if you want a more realistic character, then you might want to consider using ZBrush because it's much better when it comes to, realistic characters to sculpt in there. But for stylistic characters, Blender will do just fine. So to continue the story, back then, as I said, didn't have a graphics tablet, so I couldn't really sculpt. So I decided, you know what, I'm gonna model characters from scratch. And that's what I did. And then at the start of this year, actually, I remember it was January 1st, I decided, you know what, I'm gonna start sculpting characters in Blender because I recently got, or I should say I borrowed a friend's tablet. I was able to start sculpting. So I decided to learn sculpting, and this is basically where we are right now. So here I decided to use some clay strips. As you can see there, I added like an eye shape on the knees, and then I added 2 lines, one at the top and one at the bottom, representing the bones of the leg. Then I smoothed it out, and now I'm just creasing it with the crease brush to add the detail for the muscles. And once again, I'm grabbing the clay strips. Now, unfortunately, Blender does not have a default clay strips shortcut, at least in the version that I'm using. So you might have to add the shortcut yourself, or you can just click on it. So there I was just adding some clay strips at the top of the knee for a muscle, and this is another muscle right here that I'm adding, just using clay strips. And here I'm just creasing it to give that muscle a little bit more detail and definition, so it's more pronounced. And you know, obviously just smoothing in between. Adding a little bit more crease there. So here I noticed that the back muscle there needs to be a little bit more to the back. So I just, you know, pushed it or pulled it to the back a little bit. And once again, you know, if you're wondering, how do you know where to crease, you know, how to get the desired result? It's just, you know, watching references, watching tutorials, and just gaining experience from it. So here I noticed that the back side of the legs were a little bit flat, so I decided to add some clay strips to give it a little bit more roundness. And here I'm just checking to see if, you know, if that roundness needs to be added a little bit more. And as you can see here, I'm just adding a little more clay strips. Clay strips are very useful for adding volume. So now that I've actually added the legs, I can get a better understanding where the butt is going to be. But I guess I decided not to move it yet. We're back to the torso. And if you're wondering, how am I switching between sculpt mode and, you know, object mode? If you press if you press Control Tab, you can switch, you will basically get a pie menu in which you can see all the modes. You have your sculpt mode, object mode, edit mode, and others. And then you can just use your mouse to select which mode you want to go through. And I use that very often. So Control Tab to get that pie menu to switch modes. And once again, I'm just adding a little bit more detail here around the ab area. Now keep in mind that when you're sculpting, you don't want to add too much detail, because later on you're going to be retopologizing it, and during the retopology process you're going to lose a lot of detail. So there's no point in adding, an absurd amount of detail when you're going to lose it anyways when you retopologize. So here I'm just talking with chat, giving them some pointers and explaining some things as well. So a part of the mesh for the legs was showing, or was clipping I should say, on the torso, so I just moved it a little bit to the front. Alright, looks like I didn't like the old butt, so I decided to just grab a new one. Same process, add a sphere, give it a mirror, move it around, scale it, rotate it. Now I'm in sculpt mode. And just giving some adjustments. So people often ask me, how long does a character take me to make? And nowadays it's between 9 hours and 15 hours, which I'm trying to kind of get down to maybe like on average maybe 7 or 8 hours. That would be pretty good. Now, speed, you shouldn't really be, when you're learning on, speed isn't something that you should really consider yourself. For example, my first character that I ever made took me 9 months to actually make. But every character afterwards took less and less. But just make sure that you're learning and that you don't consider yourself with just speed. Take it nice and easy. But also keep in mind that if you are making a certain character for a long period of time, you want to make it perfect, consider just calling it quits and starting a fresh character. Because if you just focus on one character to make it perfect, that's going to cause frustration. It's going to cause to maybe lose motivation, and that's definitely not what you want when you're starting out. So just think of it as a learning experience. You made that character, the way you made it might not be perfect, but at least you've learned something and you can move on to the next character. So here I added a cylinder, gave it a mirror modifier, and gave it some loop cuts, and I went moved it towards the arm area, and I basically slotted it in between the shoulder and the armpit. So here I went into face orientation mode to see if I have some flipped normals, and as you can see there, I did have some flipped normals. So I decided, you know what? Let me just get rid of that. Or not. I guess I just basically redid it. And then you can press Alt-N and you will get this menu. And at the top of that menu, you will see a button that says flip, and you can just flip the normals. And now I basically continued where I left off. So I'm just moving the arm a little bit. As you can see here, I am making my character using the A pose. It's just the way I've learned how to basically create characters. There are upsides and downsides to using A pose. The same thing can be said for the T pose, upsides and downsides. You can find those upsides and downsides if you just Google it. So once again, I remeshed it. Once again, to remind you guys, Shift R to choose the amount that you want to remesh. The lower the number on the screen is, the higher density the mesh is going to be. And then after you choose the number, you can just press Control R to actually remesh it. So once again, just following some references, I'm adding some creases in the arms for the muscles. Here I'm switching back to add more detail to the back. So now we're going to be doing some boobas. So I add another sphere. Once again, add a mirror modifier to it. Position it. Scale it up or down. So once again, I'm using proportional editing right there at the top to get like a booba shape. And then I rotate it from the top view. And then I hide the arm. And then from that view that you just saw, I rotate it a little bit down. So I think at this point I just continue working on the torso a little bit. And here I'm just probably checking my references and just looking if the body looks good. And if the proportions are good, if the anatomy is good. Once again, I'm not really going for a perfectly, realistic character, but I do have a certain amount of realism I want to achieve. So there I just used the grab brush to pull out the neck. And here I'm using the scrape brush to basically flatten out the top of the neck. You don't have to do this, it's just, I like doing it. Going into side view to adjust the shape of the neck. And once again, I'm going to be remeshing the mesh to get a little bit more density. And then, after remeshing it, just smooth it out a little bit. Now here I noticed that the shoulders were a little bit uneven. So I'm just adding a little bit of volume to the back. And then adding a little bit more volume. And then smoothing out the front part. Here I'm just adjusting the actual shoulder shape, moving the back side a little bit. So as you can see here at this point, I'm starting to add a little bit more detail to this upper area of the body using the crease brush. And using clay strips here to kind of give this back shape a little bit more volume. Now I want you to imagine like a triangle right here. As you can see here, there's the three faces, one at the front, one at the back, and then one near the, the muscle. And you basically want to use a crease brush to kind of exaggerate that triangle. And after I crease every time, I just smooth it over. Here I'm just remeshing once again to get a little bit more density. And remember that every time you remesh, in certain areas you lose some detail. You will see it once you actually do it, trust me. So you have to basically get that detail back again by, repeating what you already did, like creasing or, moving things around. So as you can see here, I'm just repeating some of the things, some of the steps I already did to basically get that detail back. So here, I think I selected the booba, and I decided to kind of sculpt them into the shape they're supposed to have. So as you can see here, it's pretty low poly, but that doesn't mean that you can't sculpt it. I went into edit mode and just pushed them a little bit forward. and I'm just checking it from all the angles to see if they look good. Comparing it with my reference and, you know, the standard stuff. From time to time, you might see some cuts, some video editing cuts. Don't worry, you're not missing out on anything. It's just me probably chatting with Twitch, and I sometimes get distracted, and I basically don't really sculpt or model or anything. So I'm just basically cutting out the parts where I'm not doing anything. So here I'm using the crease brush, and then I'm pressing and holding Control to do like an invert crease. That's going to like crease outwards to add that bone detail. So once again, I'm going into edit mode and just moving this area here near the belly button a little bit up to give it that more sporty look. So I guess while we're watching this, I can answer another question that I usually get. It's, you know, how did I learn Blender? What did I do? Like, did I finish any like school? And the very simple answer is I'm self-taught. Pretty much YouTube and Twitch were my best friends. I watched a bunch of YouTube videos, a bunch of Twitch VODs from streamers. I already mentioned one of them being Flycat. That's basically where I learned how to model. I just followed Flycat's Elf Night tutorial. Well, it's not really a tutorial, it's a time lapse, but I slowed it down and I just followed it step by step. Whenever they did a move, like they moved a vertex or they did something, I would just pause the video and follow what they did. And it took me a long time, but it was worth it at the end. And that's also another reason why I'm making this tutorial series, is to simplify, you know, Blender sculpting and modeling to new people, so that they don't have to like think about, oh, what did this in time lapse? What did this guy do in his time lapse? Like, it's so fast, I can't keep up and stuff like that. That's why I'm making this tutorial series where I don't speed anything up, I don't cut anything out. You can see it from start to finish, exactly what I did, how I did it. And I obviously am here to give you some tips and explain what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Another person that I want to credit is Rushzilla on Twitch. Basically, he's a Twitch streamer and YouTuber. He posts YouTube tutorials as well. Basically, he taught me how to sculpt characters, and I have to thank him for that. And obviously, there's plenty of other YouTubers, for example, like Danny Mac, which I learned how to do retopology from him, and you will see that later on, and many, many others on YouTube. So just self-taught. I didn't finish any schools or anything, no courses. Just learned it the old-fashioned way on YouTube. So in the background, as you can see here, just adding creases, using the crease brush, using the grab brush to move things around. And as you can see here, I'm just using crease and grab brush and smooth brush, and from time to time I use clay strips in certain areas. Maybe the pinch brush later on, you'll see that I use it a little bit. But it's mostly just, crease, grab, and smooth. And that's going to be your majority. Do I use any custom brushes? Nope, not really. I always try to stick with just default Blender stuff. I don't like to use add-ons. I don't like to just keep it simple. That's how I like to do things. So I should probably talk about future episodes. So this is going to be episode 1. As you can see here, it's pretty long, but it's not going to be the only one. There's going to be 6 episodes for this playlist. Each of them is going to be pretty long. Some of them are going to be shorter than others, but they're all going to be, between, 1 hour and like 2 hours, maybe more. So yeah, you're gonna basically see me doing sculpting, retopology, adding the materials using Blender nodes, rigging, posing, getting the lights for the scene, adding some, modeling some props for the character. Obviously, the outfit itself is going to be modeled as well. So pretty much everything that you saw in the original image at the start, you're going to see, and more. Another tip I can give you guys is that at any point in the video, you can always see how many vertices or faces I have. By looking at the bottom right corner, you will see a bunch of statistics. In there, you'll be able to see the exact density of the mesh or meshes, because it shows the total amount for all the meshes in the scene. So as you can see here, I started with a sphere and then moved it up. This is going to be the face of the character, or say the head. I obviously enabled symmetry in the top right corner. And now I'm just sculpting the face. Once again, using the grab brush And I also disabled the monkey here. It's not really needed at this point. So I'm just looking at the reference and slowly start to get the basic shape of the head there. Move the head a little bit down, I guess. And once again, Shift R and then Control R to retopologize. Later on in the series, I will show you how to retopologize using the menu on the right, but for now I just use the shortcuts. Now in the bottom left corner, you can see the reference that I'm using, just to, to give you guys on what kind of stuff I use for references. You can see it there in the bottom left corner. Oh yeah, right there I'm just explaining how to manually remesh. So you can see there where it says voxel size, and then there was a button that you could see if you rewind that says remesh. You just click on it. So right now I'm just grabbing the crease brush to crease out the jaw. And then I'm once again using the crease brush to crease out the opposite direction now. And then smoothing it out. So right now I'm grabbing the clay strips and pressing and hold Control to basically push the clay strips inside the mesh. And then using the crease brush to just crease it a little bit. And then using the grab brush to pull out the nose. And then doing the same thing again. Now I'm still learning how to sculpt faces and bodies, so don't expect perfection at the start. It took me quite a while to actually get the face to acceptable levels of So here I'm just once again looking at the reference over and over. And then remeshing it to get a little bit more detail. Or I should say more density. So here I'm just pushing the chin a little bit forward. get a little bit more room for the mouth. Moving the jaw a little bit forward. Later on I think it's at this point, yeah, I fixed the jaw. And then once again remeshing it to gain more density, because first you start getting with the basic shapes, the nose, maybe add a little bit of the mouth, and then once you're ready you can get a little bit more density, add a little bit more detail, add a little bit more density, and that's the workflow, at least that I use in Blender. There are other ways, of course. So here I'm using the blobber brush to add the nostrils for the nose. And yes, I know the character looks weird at this point, but slowly it will get there. So here I'm starting to work on the mouth a little bit. I watched Danny Mac's tutorial on how to create lips, and that's basically what I'm using as my knowledge. So I just recommend watching that tutorial. Just type in Danny Mac lips tutorial on YouTube and it should be the first one to pop out. Here I'm adding the nostrils. Going back to the lips. And here I'm just using the inflate brush to kind of inflate the lips a little bit. And you want the upper lip to be more forward than the lower lip. So here I'm just masking everything. Oh, I guess not. Never mind. I'll talk about that later on. So here I want to add a little bit more puffiness to the cheeks. So you can use clay strips for that to add a little bit of volume. As you saw there, when I remeshed, I lost some detail near the mouth. So that's why, whenever you remesh something, keep in mind that you will lose some detail. Now, if you're wondering, well, what if I want to get a little bit more topology, a little bit more density, I should say, without remeshing? Well, you can just always subdivide a mesh. Don't forget about that. You just go into the modifiers tab, add a subdivide surface, and then you just apply it. And that way you keep the detail while also getting a little bit more density. So here I just imported some eyes. And as you can see here, these eyes have a UV map. You can see it right there. Those are just regular UV spheres that have been UV unwrapped. So you just select those faces at the front that I'm trying to select and failing miserably. There you go. And then UV unwrap it, and you get that. And then you can select the other place, UV unwrap, and then just scale it down and move it in the bottom right corner, for example. And the reason why we need to do this is because of the material that is on these eyes, which you can see right there. This is the material. Now, unfortunately, in the actual stream itself, I forgot that I had a reference there in front of me, so you couldn't really see, or I should say, hopefully you'll be able to see it once I zoom in. But here are the colors of the eyes, just explaining that each color basically represents a certain portion of the eye. And you can see that the material is fully procedural, so that you can always change it whenever you want. Now here I'm just explaining that if you press, I think it's Control Tab or Shift Tab. Sorry, it's a Shift Space Bar. Yeah, Shift Space Bar. You can maximize a window where your mouse is located. So here I'm just moving the head a little bit down. And then I'm just adjusting the eyes to be a little bit inside the socket. So here I was just using the draw brush, which is like the basic brush at the very top left, to kind of fill in the eyes. And then I use the crease brush to kind of give them a little bit more shape. At this point, she was looking very angry and like an alien. But as I said, take it nice and slow. It might look weird at first, but you'll get there. I just moved a little bit the eyes to the back, and now I'm using the crease brush to get the eye shape that I want. Adding a little bit more volume to the sides. And then once again using the crease brush while holding Control to basically crease it outwards instead of inwards. And here I'm just being a little bit organized, moving things around. In the collections, I decided to hide the eyes to kind of dig out this area inside the eyes. And then I remeshed it. Then brought back the eyes. Moving things around, using the crease brush to pull things out or push them in. And just, looking at the reference at all times. Now, if you're wondering, well, your character doesn't really look like the reference in the bottom left corner. Well, true. That's true. But it was more of an inspiration at this point. I had something in mind that I wanted to make, and the reference in the bottom left corner was just there to help me out. So here I'm just adding a little bit more creases, using the inflate brush to inflate the lower and upper lip. And here I'm using once again the crease brush, but this time around with the Control enabled, or I should say I'm pressing and holding Control. And here I think this is the first time I'm using the crease brush. Or I should say the pinch brush, sorry, pinch brush, the yellow pinch brush. Shortcut is just P in Blender. And basically what the pinch brush does is it just pinches things, I guess. Simple as that. Very useful tool. If you have a high poly or high resolution mesh, the pinch brush can give you nice, clean shapes in certain cases. So there I was using a mask. The way you do use a mask, you press Control plus Shift, and then you just press and hold left click and just drag around, and you will get this lasso tool. So that's Control Shift, and then press and hold left click to drag around. So I remember when I was making this character, I would have these ups and downs where in certain parts the character would look nice, and then I would do something, and then the character would start looking really bad, and then I would fix it, and the character would look nice again, but then, I would mess it up again. So it's trial and error when you're first starting out. So here I realized that the nose is a little bit too big. Decided, you know what? Time to make it smaller. So I just use the grab brush, pull it down, pull it towards the face a little bit, make it smaller, use the crease brush to give it a little bit more shape. And here I just pushed it a little bit down because the area between the nose and the mouth, which I don't remember how it's called, but it was too big. So I just pushed the nose a little bit down to make that area smaller. Or more specifically, to make the distance between the mouth and the nose smaller. Usually if you want to make a cute character, you want that area to be fairly small, like really small. If you're going for more of a mature look, that area can be like medium sized or maybe in some cases long, but it's very finicky to get it just right. So yeah, at this point I wanted to make the nose a little bit more blocky. So I used the crease brush to kind of crease it. And if you're wondering why, well, I think this was recorded around the time when Arcane was, really popular. And in that TV show, the characters have, blocky faces. So that kind of style was at that time very interesting for me. So once again, adding a little bit more volume to the cheeks to make them a little bit more rounder and puffier. And I decided, you know what? I can just use the grab brush to move the cheeks a little bit. So I just mask the eyes. Once again, Control Shift, left click. And then I opened up this window, which you can do by pressing F2. I think is the default key binding. Press F2 and then just type in smooth, and then you will see an option to smooth weight or to smooth a mask. And you smooth out the mask, and then you use the grab brush to pull out the cheeks. So here I'm just using the crease brush to exaggerate the blockiness. Later on, I think I kind of smooth it out. So I think at this point I wanted to give the nose a little bit curvature, just a bit, to represent a little bit younger look. So at this point, as you saw, I started making the eyes smaller because I decided they were too big. So just, started using the lower eyelid to push it up to close it a little bit of the eyes so they're not as big. Making the chin a little bit more pointier and a little bit more forward. And then I wanted the chin to be a little bit more blocky, so I'm using the scrape brush from the bottom to give it that more blocky look. So here, once again, I'm using the mask tool, Control-Shift-Left-Click to mask the bottom lip and then smoothing that mask. The reason why I'm doing that is because I want to inflate a little bit of the upper lip while keeping the lower lip, not inflated or not too inflated. And then you can press Ctrl-I to invert the mask. And now I'm just inflating the lower lip a little bit. And then you can press Alt-M to clear the mask. So just Alt-M. These are all just shortcuts that you don't need to use. There's, you can just, there are buttons in Blender that you can just click on. But, to speed up your workflow, I'm just saying them out loud so you're at least familiar with them. So here I'm adding the what I like to call the eye bag. It's just like a bag shape above the eyes. I don't know what the actual official name of it is, but I just added some clay strips and creased them a little bit. So here, the back side of the eyes was a little bit too soft, so I just creased a little bit to make it a little bit sharper. Now you might have noticed throughout this tutorial that I like to do things in orthographic view. Basically, the way you get the orthographic view is you just press Alt and then you use the middle mouse button on your mouse to switch between orthographic views from the front, side, back, top, bottom, doesn't really matter. There are other shortcuts. For example, you can use the numpad keys. I think if you want like the front view, I think it's numpad 5, but I rarely use those. I just use Alt plus middle mouse click or button. And here I'm just using the crease brush to just get that nice sharp crisp edge near the mouth. Adding a little bit clay strips here to the lower mouth to give it a little bit more volume. And then just inflating it. pushing the mouth a little bit forward to give it a little bit curvature. And we're basically at the stage where we, start creasing things, pinching things, adding detail, but not too much detail. I mean, you could add a bunch of detail, but as I said, if you add too much detail, you're going to be basically just wasting your time, because a lot of that detail is going to be lost during the retopology process, and you'll see that later on. Using the mask and just moving the chin a little bit towards the center so it's a little bit more pointier. Make sure that you smooth the mask, because if you try to move things around with a mask that's not smoothed out, you will get those lines that I got. But I mean, that's not really a big deal, because as soon as you get rid of the mask, you can just smooth it over. So at this point, I am just looking at the reference, seeing what I can change, adding more detail here and there. So here I'm just using the scrape tool to kind of scrape out the bottom part of the head. So later on, that when I combine it with the body, it fits a little bit better. Then there I just was making the cheeks a little bit puffier again. And just to, once again, say it again, this is not really an anatomy tutorial. I do show you how I create my characters, but that's just my personal preference. You might not like the style, or you might like it, and that's cool if you do. But this is mainly there as a tutorial on how to use Blender to create characters. So, you might learn a bunch of tools and ways and tricks and tips that will help you out create your character in your style. So I think at this point I shaded smooth the head, which you can just go into object mode, right click on the object and shade it smooth. I don't always do this, but from time to time I like to shade it smooth to see how it's going to look when it's shaded smooth, and then I go back to shaded flat, as you can see, because I'm just used to it working in shade flat mode. I guess I should have mentioned that this isn't like a fully beginner-friendly tutorial. I do presume that you know the basics of using Blender, how to navigate, the scene, how to move your camera around, how to pan, zoom, move objects, the basics, you've probably, you've done the donuts tutorial, you know how to add modifiers and stuff like that. A lot of people think like, oh, I don't want to make a donut in Blender, I don't care about donuts. Well, the funny thing is, the donut tutorial isn't actually a donut tutorial. It's a Blender tutorial on how to get the basics of Blender, right. How to get it, how to learn the basics. And the donut there is just a bonus. Think of it as just a bonus. It's there like, oh, you made a donut. Congratulations. For example, I personally have never made a donut. I never followed the donut tutorial because I didn't really need it. Blasphemous, I know, right? But yeah. So at this point, I'm panning around, I'm looking around. My guess is that I'm nearly done with the face. And considering I am sculpting the butt, I would say that I was right. So what about the butt? Well, the butt is there to just give me a basic shape of the butt, and then later on, once I combine all the meshes together, which you will see, it gives me a basic shape to start actually creating the butt, the real butt. And you will see it later on. As you can see here, I'm using orthographic view from the bottom to kind of get that bubble butt shape in place. And you can find these arms and legs for free on many websites, like for example I think Turbo Squid and like Sketchfab. They have a bunch of free arms that are really good quality actually, and legs that are, you know, nicely modeled, look good. You can just download them for free and put them on your characters. And the reason why I'm reusing these arms instead of making them from scratch is because it just speeds up the workflow by a lot. So here I'm just checking the proportions of the arms and legs. You basically want, imagine that the arm is swinging towards the thigh. You want the tips of the fingers to be at the midway point of the thigh. And there are plenty of images that show you the correct proportions for the body, so you can always just check those out if you have any doubts. So here I think I was just adjusting the arm to be a little bit shorter. And then I decided to add a mirror to it. Just one more thing, I do not recommend for beginners to sculpt arms and legs, like fingers and like toes and stuff like that. It's definitely an annoying thing to do. So just, you know, if you're gonna make it, just model it, or you can just, as I said, grab it from various websites. So here I'm applying the mirrors for all these meshes. So I'm applying the mirror for the butt, for the arms, for the legs, for the booba, because I plan on joining all these things together. So I select them all like that, and I press Ctrl J, and now as you can see here, they're all one object. And then here I decided to add some subdivisions for the booba and for the butt. So just, you know, used the subdivision modifier and then applied it. And here I'm just explaining random stuff to Twitch. So after applying all those subdivisions, I once again select everything and then Ctrl J to combine it into one mesh. Then go to sculpt mode. I press Shift R to remesh it. And I choose 350, as you can see there. And I press Ctrl R. And now it's all one mesh. As you can see here, I'm smoothing it out. Things that were separate earlier on are now combined. That's basically what happens when you remesh things. They combine together. Think of it like a boolean that combines things together. So here, the first thing that I always like to do when I combine everything together is I work on the ass. This is where the real work starts happening. So I'm just smoothing things out, adding clay strips here and there. And yes, I know it looks weird, but I think at the end it does look pretty decent. If I remember correctly, for this character I want to do like a bubble butt. So hopefully we'll see that near the end. So there, just smoothed out the mask. And I'm just slowly giving it that like bubble look, trying to make it more round in certain areas, trying to smooth out certain other areas. Keep in mind that when you reach a certain level of mesh resolution, when it's becomes high poly, smoothing out detail or just smoothing out the mesh in certain areas will be harder and harder as you go. So here I'm just explaining to chat what I'm trying to get, what kind of shape I want to go for. And here in the bottom left corner, you can actually see the reference I'm using for the butt itself. But also for the outfit, you can see that the final outfit looks very similar to this reference. So to continue what I was going to say is that once you try to smooth out a high poly mesh, you will see that it has some issues. It's not going to smooth out. In that case, you want to use the scrape brush right here to remove a volume. So you will see me using the scrape brush from time to time. And then to add volume, you use the clay strips brush. Here I'm just, creasing this area right there to add a little bit more detail to it. Here I noticed that there's some issues with the mesh. Decided to smooth it out a little bit. And then I finally started to move on to the other parts of the mesh, here with the booba. Smooth it out a little bit here at the top. And then I realized that I had this problem right here where the two boobas basically connected to each other. And this can happen when you have meshes, closer to each other. They just connect after you remesh them. So I decided, I'm going to delete that part and just fill these holes by modeling the squares. But I decided, I only want to do that on one side of the mesh. So I decided to mirror this mesh. So I deleted the left portion of the mesh and then added a mirror modifier. And then I just decided to check to see if there are any holes in the mirror. And after realizing that there are no holes, I moved on to the next part, which was filling in the hole in the booba. I think at this point I was just checking the belly button to see if everything was okay. So I think here I just started selecting all these edges around the hole. And then just filled it in by pressing F. And then by pressing K, you get the knife tool. I decided to start combining, or not combining, but connecting these vertices. And near the end, you will see that it kind of looked like quads. Now, do you have to make it look like they're, quads? Not necessarily, because this is your sculpt mesh. So having a good topology is irrelevant. Later on, when you are retopologizing it, then you have to keep in mind the topology. But now on a high poly model, it's not necessary to, make it perfect. So here I started sculpting while I still had the mirror modifier enabled. And usually that tends to lag out Blender. So make sure that you apply the mirror and then you will see that it doesn't lag anymore. So I think it was at this point I realized I made a huge mistake. As you can see here, the armpit is way too low. Like it needs to be like up, but it's like super low. So here I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? So I was like, you know what, let's try to fix it. So I'm going to just explain ahead of time what I did. So I selected the whole arm using a mask. And after, selecting the whole thing, which took us, some time, I separated the mesh, or I should say I separated the mask from the rest of the mesh, which there's an option that you can do that in Blender. And then I moved the arm up, and then I combined them together. That's the simple explanation. But let's see how it actually turned out. Also, another thing that you have to keep in mind is that whenever you're using this lasso tool with Control-Shift, left-click, keep in mind that it will go through the mesh, meaning that not only will it mask the part that you're facing, it will also mask any mesh that's behind it. And you will see that in a second. Yeah, as you can see there, it also masks that other part as well. That's behind the shoulder. So here I'm just clearing out the mask. There is a dedicated mask brush that I'm currently using. You can see it highlighted there on the left. And just like any other brush, if you press and hold Control, instead of creating a mask, it will clear a mask. So here I masked off the problematic area, and I decided to, separate it. And then I remeshed it. Smooth it out to the area. Here we're just having some trouble with smoothing out this vertex. I think in the end I decided to just merge them all into one vertex. Or not, I guess it worked. So I decided to bring back the arms that we earlier separated. So at this point I wanted to just fill in this face like that. So I just selected the whole edge, pressed F to fill it in, and then I think I remeshed it. And then I realized, oh wait, this is mirrored. So I undid it, went to edit mode and deleted the whole left side. And then I remeshed it, smoothed out the area. And this time around, I was careful to position it where it's actually supposed to be, which, as you can see here, the armpit is supposed to be much higher. Move things around, smooth them out. So, what's the lesson learned? Well, the lesson is when you combine multiple meshes together and you remesh them, go basically look throughout your whole mesh and see if there's any parts that have remeshed incorrectly. And if there are, undo the remeshing and just select so that the remeshing number is lower, so you get a higher poly mesh. And hopefully remesh it again and see if the problem is still there. And if it's still there, try moving your meshes around so that they remesh properly. So as you can see there, I remeshed it properly this time around, and the armpit is where it's supposed to be. So now I can just smooth out things and continue where I left off. So here I'm just adding a little bit more volume in this area so that the booba connects with the shoulder, and then kind of creasing it here and there. And here I'm using the pinch brush to kind of pinch the armpit a little bit. So here I noticed the same issue as before, but I decided to kind of leave it be and do it later on. Because I remeshed the mesh again, that move-up problem that we had before basically just reappeared again. So here I'm pinching this back line. And once again, just adding a little bit more detail for the finishing touches. So here's the reference once again for the character. Now, of course, this isn't the only reference I'm using. There's plenty of others that helped me out to create this character fully. This is just one of them. So here I did the same thing. Select all the edges at the end and just fill it in together. And here I realized that the mesh is not mirrored, so I added a loop cut here in the middle. And then I just mirrored the mesh. And you can press L, and it will select all the connected vertices on that part of the mesh. And then you can just delete it, and then add a mirror modifier to it. And always just check to see if the mesh is properly mirrored. I recommend enabling clipping and then selecting the middle loop cut in between the two, mirrored meshes, and just moving that left and right, and hopefully that will, perfectly mirror it. So here, once again, I am using the knife tool, which you can just press K, and you just basically connect the vertices together. And here was just double checking to see if the face orientation for the normals was good or not, and yes, it was good. And the way I'm using the knife tool is you just click on one vertex, click on the other one, and then you press enter, and that will apply it. And then you just repeat that over and over. And you will see that, I create triangles, I create n-gons, probably in some cases. And as I said, that's fine because this is our high poly model. It doesn't have to be perfectly, the topology, it's not supposed to be perfect. That's not the point of this thing. Here I'm just connecting it so that it has, some topology in that hole, so that later on when I go to smooth it, it smooths out, fine. Another thing you can do is you can select all the edges of a hole, and if you have an even amount of edges, you can press Ctrl F, and then you will see an option that says grid fill, and basically it will automatically fill the grid for you, but the number of edges has to be even. If they're not, then that grid fill will not work. So I guess that's another tip I can give you guys. So here I'm just smoothing out that hole so that it looks nice. And if you don't want to deal with this kind of issue when it comes to boobas, just make sure that the boobas are a little bit separated before you remesh them. They're more, they're further apart from each other. Or another way you can bypass this problem is to just remesh it so it's denser. Like, so the, you know, the number that the voxel size is like lower, so that it doesn't cause any holes, or bridges, I should say. So it doesn't bridge the willows together. So here I think I was just scaling the head a little bit so it's bigger, and then moving it down. And then I think at this point I wanted to adjust the neck so it, you know, fits, it connects to the head a little bit better. Adding a little bit of volume there using clay strips. And here I'm just sharpening a little bit the jaw and making the cheeks a little bit puffier here. Ah yes, this was the part where I actually made the nose a little bit curvier. To give it that a little bit, you know, more younger look. Yeah, so now I have another reference in the bottom left corner. And this one is about the hair. So I use curves for my hairstyles. And I have two main curves. We have the path, which is basically your hair strands. And then we have the hair shape, basically. And the hair shape is just like a circle curve, which controls the shape of the hair. You will see how it works. So as you can see here, I went into orthographic view from the top, and I'm just subdividing these vertices and manipulating them so that they, you know, create the shape that I want. And here I'm changing the type of the, you know, each vertex has its own type. So I think I changed them to be vector to give me a little bit more control on the shape. And then I duplicated it, and you will see why later on. And that's basically the hair shape. So then I go into the curve options right here, and in geometry, I click on object, and then I select the hair shape thing, and then I press Alt S to scale it down, and then I do that again. And then you can, what I usually do, let's see if I'm going to do it this time around. Yeah, so okay, I add a mirror, that's good. And There's plenty of hair tutorials on Blender that you can find. Here I'm just rotating the hairs so they fit. And now what I'm doing is I'm just grabbing these vertices and positioning the hair. And then I scaled this guy down so he's like tiny. Same thing here for the both ends of the both ends of the curve. And then what I'm doing here is I'm pressing Control T to tilt the curve. So you saw how it rotated itself? That's basically tilting it. So you press Control T, and then here I'm just pressing Alt S once again to scale individual points. And then, you know, I'm just demonstrating things here for Twitch. At this point, I'm just moving vertices around to, you know, get the desired shape. Then I duplicate it, so Shift D to duplicate. And then I press Escape to cancel the movement. So it's still, you know, it's still duplicated, but it's in the same position as the original. And then I go into Edit mode, and then I just move it around. So now with the second one, I just position it so it's, you know, next to the first one, tilt it, move it, scale it. They have the same controls, you know, you just press G to move, Alt S to scale. It's not S, it's Alt S. If you just press S, nothing's gonna happen. And then instead of rotating and pressing R, you rotate it. Well, you can still use actually R to rotate multiple vertices at once. But if you only have one vertex selected and you press R, nothing's going to happen. So you have to have multiple vertices selected for rotation to work. And then for tilting, as I said, Control T. And those are your basic controls when it comes to curves. So as you saw there, I just duplicate, Shift D to duplicate, press Escape, and then went to Edit mode to move it around. Because I don't want to move it around when it's in object mode. So I guess while we're, you know, watching this, let's talk about alternatives. What are other alternatives for making hair? Well, one of the alternatives is that you can sculpt the hair, right? You know, just like how you sculpt the body, you can also sculpt the hair. Let's talk about the upsides. Upsides is you can get a lot of detail in sculpting. So, you know, that's one of the upsides. The downside is that if you want a lot of detail, you have to, you know, sculpt a really high poly. You have to retopologize it later on, and basically you have to do a lot of more work. But you know, it does look in certain cases a lot nicer. Another method is hair cards. So usually games have this option, or not have this option. Games use this option because they have to. Hair has to be optimized, so they use hair cards. Basically, hair cards are just flat planes that have textures on them that look like hair. And that's also a pretty good way of doing hair. It's usually very optimized, and it does take a lot more work to actually make it look good. But if you manage to do it, it does look good, nice, and it is very optimized. Now, this last part is basically hair models, like what I'm doing right here with curves. The benefits is that they're easy to manipulate. They can look very nice in certain areas. The downside of the hair models is that there are certain hairstyles that they cannot really emulate well. I mean, they can, but it takes a lot more work to make them. So those are basically the upsides and downsides of each of the hairstyles. In my opinion, they're all valid. It's just, choose whatever you want to make. For pretty much 95% of my characters, let's call it like that, I use this technique right here. There are a couple characters that I made using hair cards. They look nice, and there's also some characters that I sculpted the hair. But for the majority of the time, I use this method. I guess another thing I should mention is that when it comes to using this method that I'm showing you right here, is that it's fully modular, fully procedural, meaning that at any point you can always change. You can make certain hairs thicker, thinner, you can move them. And one important part is that when you're, for example, posing your character, and let's say, you have this perfect pose, everything is good, but guess what? Some of the hair is like clipping somewhere, Well, with this method, you can enable shape keys, which I'll talk about shape keys later on in the tutorial. But the shape keys allow you to move a mesh in a certain way, and then keep it modular, meaning you can always go back to the original look of the mesh. I guess procedural is the word I'm looking for, not modular. So that's another, positive. Now, technically speaking, you could do the same thing for hair cards. Use shape keys on them as well. And technically speaking, you can also do it with sculpting as well. But those methods tend to be a little bit more hassle, and they just require a lot more work. And for example, you can't really, when it comes to like sculpting, you sculpted this hair, but you want a certain part of the hair to be, maybe inflated a little bit. You have to sculpt that in. Whereas with hair cards or hair modeling like this, you can just grab that part of the hair and then go into edit mode and select the vertex and just, scale it up and inflate it, So here I'm just, I added like a cylinder, gave it some solidify, and then I copied one of the hairs. I got rid of the mirror modifier, and I'm gonna add like a ponytail to it, to the hairstyle. As you can see here, I'm kind of following the reference on the bottom left corner. Right now I'm doing the back side of the hair, but soon I think I'll start to do working on the front side, like the bangs and the bits at the sides. And don't forget that just like a regular mesh, you can click on 2 vertices or 2 points, and then you can subdivide them by just right-clicking, and then at the top there should be subdividing. You can just click on that and it will subdivide those 2 points to create 1 or more points. So here I just duplicated it and then decided to move things around. And then once again, you can press Ctrl-T to tilt it around to create these nice, wavy patterns. So I think at this point, I decided to duplicate the hair shape. Or I guess not. I guess I decided to just change the hair shape, and when you change the hair shape, it will change, the shape of the hair for all the hairs that are connected to it. So as you can see here, I didn't do anything here at the top, but by just changing the hair shape, it changes it for all of them because they're all linked. So here I decided that this back part here needs to be filled in. So I decided to delete vertices. Don't forget, you can always do that. You can delete stuff. You can also add it. So we're nearing the end of the video here. We got a couple of more minutes. So I just wanted to talk about, stuff for the future. So hopefully, if everything goes correctly, the first part will get uploaded on a Monday, and then you should see the second part pretty much the next day. And then the third part is going to be the next day and the next day, and basically until the parts are done, which there should be 6 of them. And then once that first series is completed for this fitness character, there might be like a small break, and then hopefully I will start uploading the episodes for my second character. And actually, before I continue on, I just see that I enabled snap mode. So the way you enable snap mode is you press Shift Tab, or there's a button at the top that glows blue when you click on it. And then basically I enabled face snap mode, and this allows you to snap the selected thing, which in this case was just a vertex, to snap it on top of a face. For example, the face of the head right there. So that's what I wanted to just add. So to continue where I left off, yeah. So if everything goes correctly, after some time, you will see the second tutorial series for another character. And then after that, well, we'll see about that, but I'll plan on adding more tutorials as we go on. if you want to check me out, I do have as I said, a Twitch streaming account. So I stream every day except the weekends. So feel free to check me out. I don't really have a particular schedule that I start my stream on, but I do stream every day. So it's gonna be there. And then obviously the other thing is my Discord server. So if you have a Discord account, feel free to check me out. It's just a chill server to hang around, share art, ideas, tips and tricks. And obviously I share all my finished art pieces there. So if you want to check my work, you can see it there. Do be careful. There are some not safe for work things that I post. So just keep that in mind. Not too often, but it happens from time to time. And yeah, that's pretty much it, really. If everything goes correctly, tomorrow there should be a second episode. I think in the second episode we do some retopology and stuff. We'll see. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll leave you guys with the rest of the video. So yeah, enjoy, take care, have a lovely day, and yeah, bye bye.